Hello, listeners, and welcome to the latest episode of Not That Important. We're recording this after India's victory against Australia. So that gives us the opportunity to discuss the first round of fixtures now that all 10 teams have played. We're just going to go through a quick recap of all the games. Yep. So just to start things off, I know, Arman, you wanted to go a little bit into the analysis of England versus New Zealand. But before that, I did have a little bit of a rant that I want to get through. So let's start things off with the opening game of the tournament, played at Ahmedabad, which is the biggest stadium in the world with a capacity of 130,000, the biggest cricket stadium at least. Now, in almost every World Cup, whether that be cricket or football, we see the hosts play the first game. There's a packed crowd, and it kicks off the event with the kind of excitement you need to start things off. Now, Arman, in this tournament, there's only one team, which is the host India, that have the sort of following that can actually sell out a 100,000-seater stadium. So naturally, given the genius level of planning that's been involved in this event, the first game was between England and New Zealand in front of a half-empty crowd, which for me was very disheartening to see. I know the ground filled up a little bit more in the second innings, but like this is the marquee event for world cricket, and so these images go all over the world. So I don't think it's a good look for our sport to be seeing this. Apparently, there were around like 30,000 spectators, or maybe close to 40,000 towards the end of the game, which is a pretty healthy number for cricket. But like just given the size of the stadium, it still looked like the ground was mostly empty. And like, if you wanted to play England and New Zealand, if you wanted to repeat to the 2019 final, like I get all that. But then like schedule the game somewhere where like you can actually fill the stadium, right? Like schedule it in Chennai, schedule it in Mumbai, schedule it in Delhi, where you actually have like established cricket community to come in and fill that stadium. So like I don't really understand what the thinking was here. I was thinking of like what they could have done better. So a couple of novel ideas that I had, like very, very out of the box thinking for me here. Like maybe they could have sold the tickets a little earlier than 41 days before the tournament, just to give international fans a little bit of time to plan their travel out here. Like now I don't know who plans these events. Like I don't know if it's the BCCI, is it the ICC? Is there a difference between the two? I don't know any of this. And before any Indian fans like come at me, like I'm sure this won't be an issue throughout the tournament because I know the Indian public loves cricket more than anyone else possibly, and I don't blame them for not showing up to this game at all because let's be honest, like buying tickets has been a fiasco for local fans as well, from what I've heard. And I think like this is what happens when you get politics to meddle with sports, right? And like, let's not even get into the fact that Pakistani media and journalists haven't been given visas, which I think is frankly like a disgrace at this point. Like apparently Pakistani journalists को बोला गया है कि अब वो questions जो media press conferences में देते हैं वो WhatsApp के through भेजा करें. Like बड़ी मेहरबानी की है इन लोगों ने. So
अगर
like
एक दो को नहीं दी हुई है ना, लेकिन सर्टेन जर्नलिस्ट में जिनका नाम नहीं लूंगा तो वो फिर भी सही है.
हाँ पाकिस्तान में वैसे बात तो सही की है तुमने कि ऐसे जर्नलिस्ट हैं जिनको हमने देखना भी नहीं है
आने
लेकिन
भी नहीं
that's
देना
besides the
चाहिए.
point, right? Like even if you look at it from an Indian perspective, like Sachin, who's like one of the great or one the greatest cricketer to come out from India, like the way they revere him, like he's such a hero in India, and he had to
There's
come out
like
with the
10
World
people
Cup
there.
trophy, waving to like a non-existent crowd. So like I don't think
Yeah.
like that's the sort of image or like that you want to
It
kick
just
off the
it
World
makes
Cup
no
with, and I
sense.
think honestly like
I don't think
getting
there
away
are 120,000 people in all of New Zealand, and they decided to put these guys as games in Modi Stadium. Like they could have picked any other stadium. First of all, a host always plays the first game. If you don't want to play on a Thursday, have the tournament start on a Saturday, man. It's not that
yeah.
it's not that tough. And we're not criticizing the Indian public because as Karachi, as local Karachi boys, we know कि हमारे लोग चाहे जितने भी फारिग हो मैच देखने नहीं जाएंगे चाहे पाकिस्तान भी खेल रहा हो तो वो अहमदाबाद का क्राउड क्यों देखने जाएगा किसी रैंडम टीम को like it's
Wait,
not
and like
their home team.
going further than that, like we've seen the sort of like reverence that Indian fans have for cricket, right? हमने देखा कि पाकिस्तानी टीम को कितना अच्छा मतलब वेलकम मिला हैदराबाद एयरपोर्ट पे हैदराबाद के होटल में and like the Indian public loves cricket as a whole, right? So I'm sure it'll be a great tournament, but we just wanted to call out the inept organization to start off with. And I don't know again whether that falls under the BCCI or the ICC, but that is something that we wanted to get off our chest before we get into the cricket.
Now that we do get into it, let's get into the first game of this tournament, which is obviously England versus New Zealand, a repeat of the 2019 final. And New Zealand, despite not having Lucky Ferguson or Kane Williamson or Ish Sodhi, or I'm missing someone else, Tim Saudi, right? Four of their
Yeah,
main starters, a lot of the times, they absolutely wiped the floor with England. In a way you can only expect from New Zealand because they do start off tournaments so well. It doesn't matter who they have or don't have; they're such a tight knit unit, and I think they really humbled England. It really wasn't a close game at any stage.
not at all. Like again, New Zealand continued to deliver and rise to the occasion when it matters, right? Like every time a tournament kicks off, like we spoke about this in our preview as well, we're continue to like write them off as like underdogs or like the dark horses almost. But then when the tournament starts, like these are this is a tournament side. They always deliver when it really matters, and again, continuing to prove that to all of us here. One thing to call out is Ben Stokes was injured for England, so they did have one of their key players missing as well. But I
No,
think like
bro, New Zealand's missing 4 or 5 guys, bro. Don't give them that excuse.
no,
They
I'm not
played
giving the excuse,
trash.
just calling it out, right?
Absolutely. I know you wanted to get into their batting a little bit, and some of the you had complaints with how they approached their batting. So why don't you get
Yeah,
into
like
that?
I think obviously they started off like the same way you expect from England. Like Bairstow hit like I believe the second ball of the World Cup for six, and that's exactly like the sort
Yeah.
of start that we expected from them. I think just going a little deeper into their batting order, like I think the way Harry Brook played sort of epitomized everything that was good and bad with England in this game. So just taking a step back, I think going back to the 2019 World Cup and England's white ball revolution, like controlled aggression has been key to all this. And I say the word controlled aggression because it's not just blindly swinging, right? Like it's a mix of an extremely courageous approach mixed with extreme skill as well in terms of picking the right shot to hit on the right ball. And that's been what's been so remarkable about the brand of cricket that they've brought to the table here. And when I compare that with the way Harry Brook batted today, like he was playing Rachin Ravindra bowling and he hit him for like two fours and a six in the over and then went for another shot on the fourth ball. Like this isn't T20 cricket; it's one day cricket. Like he lost his wicket that way. He'd already gotten um, around 15 runs off the over. There was no need for that, and so I think that's why it comes back to that controlled aggression where you pick the right moments to attack. And here, I think a little bit of his inexperience showed. And I'm sure like he has plenty of talent. Like Harry Brook will bounce back from this, but I think that was one of the reasons why England maybe didn't do as well today. And I was listening to Owen Morgan talk. Obviously, he's commentating on the World Cup, and he spoke about how like whenever England face these sort of losses, what's discussed in the dressing room is to go even harder next game. And I'm sure they'll come out with that sort of fury. But I think it's just about picking the right moment to attack. And here maybe they got a little bit ahead of themselves sometimes. And like at the same time, like we saw an excellent innings from Joe Root, which is exactly like what we were expecting of him. But yeah, they definitely fell short from like the sort of 350 score that they were probably looking for on this pitch, just to put pressure on the New Zealanders, because as we saw when they came out to bat, like they made light work of this chase.
Every single player on England was in double digits, all 11 of them. You don't see that a lot. So that means every single person got off to a start. If one person had just taken a little bit of responsibility and played with a little bit more game awareness, they would have gotten to that 320, 330. And you don't know, it might be a different ball game. The way Russian Ravindra came in the second innings, though, they've really found themselves an X factor. And he's a funny guy. Like he's apparently named after Rahul Dravid and Sachin Tendulkar. And you hear him talk, and he sounds like a bit like one of these cricket nerds. Like he gives you
Yeah.
a little bit of like a Marnus Labuschagne type vibe. But I think they've really found themselves an X factor, and I would they will now. I mean, the guy's made 100, but they should continue to find a way to fit him in and give him that confidence to play. Even if Kane's back, maybe you open him. Maybe Will Young sits out. I'm not quite sure. New Zealand have a lot of good options and have a lot of good players who hopefully be coming into fitness in the coming few days, in the coming few weeks or so. So they have a lot of good selection dilemmas on their hands. And then Devin Conway is just proving what a great all format player he is. He was a guy we discussed about having a chance to be the top scorer, and he put on an absolute clinic. Both of these guys making their World Cup debuts, and it didn't look like it. They were fantastic. And England's bowling, as we talked about a little, they lacked a lot of venom. I know it's only one game, but they didn't really seem to be on it that day at all.
Just coming back to Rachin Ravindra for a second, like some of the shots he played, like we saw him in the warm up game against Pakistan as well. Like it was really impressive, and then to take that out into like the first game of the World Cup as like a youngster, like very, very impressed by what I saw from him and excited to see what he does for the rest of the tournament. I also heard that he was like, like a fan like the rest of us during the 2019 World Cup. Like he was watching the final in like a bar with his friends or whatever. So it's like from a fan's perspective, really good to see that someone like that has now made his name like at the forefront of like the first game of the World Cup with New Zealand getting one back on England, I guess. And yeah, like with the English bowlers, like you said, they didn't deliver at all today. With India, most of the stadiums do have flat batting tracks, with like the exception of like Chennai and maybe like one or two others. And like the Ahmedabad pitch sort of epitomized that, where it was like very easy to bat, and so like with the base coming onto the ball, that was always going to be easy for New Zealand to get that away. So you really need to be careful about like the lines you bowl. And England just didn't get that right today. So that's something that they really need to go back and think about. Overall, like just from an England perspective, like not very worried overall because they have the firepower and personnel and the pedigree to bounce back. But very, very good start for New Zealand and encouraging for them, definitely. But like this is a long tournament, so there will be ups and downs for all teams. So definitely um, not really taking many major lessons from it. Just like, again, with New
It's
Zealand,
too early
they
to
always
take
seem
too many
to step up
lessons
when it
from
matters. Yep.
anything at this stage. Then we get into our third game, Hux, which is obviously an Asian derby between Afghanistan and Bangladesh. Any thoughts on that game?
Yeah, so I obviously didn't get to see this game live because Afghanistan obviously
You're not
collapsed
supposed
to
to. You're not supposed to admit that,
156.
man. You're not supposed to admit that.
I did catch the end of it, and I saw the highlights, and I think just Afghanistan doing Afghanistan things. Like they were comfortably batting at 100 for three, 112 for three, and then their captain Hashmatullah Shahidi came out and played like an absurd knock where he put pressure on Ramanullah Gurbaz, who was batting really well by just playing dot balls after dot balls. And then he eventually threw his wicket away because he couldn't handle the pressure of not being able to rotate the strike. And that just sort of epitomized their entire team because their middle order just collapsed. And suddenly from 112 for three, they went to 156 all out, which like that just won't cut it in this World Cup, Like there was no pressure on Bangladesh. Their spinners continued to deliver. Tashkent got a couple of wickets, like Mehdi Hassan Miraz got 3 wickets. Shakib delivered. As we expect from Bangladesh, they usually start tournaments well, like at least like in World Cups in the recent past. And they've continued that here. But yeah, for Afghanistan, like 20s and 30s won't cut it here. This isn't a T20 game. Their batting needs to take some responsibility and play out the 50 overs because if not, like, um, they're not going to be able to challenge many teams here. Similarly, like with their fielding, like they did create opportunities. We know that they have the bowling where like they can put teams under pressure, but they dropped 3 catches. And when you're defending 156, like that's just not on. So all in all, I mentioned Mehdi Hassan Miraz getting 3 wickets, but he also backed that up with a 50 and a good knock from Najmul Hassan Shanto, who we picked as one of their key men. So, like, again, overall for Bangladesh, really good start. And they'll be hoping to take that on to their next game and sort of capitalize. They do play England next. So again, England will definitely be coming hard at them. But yeah, for Afghanistan, they have India next, so like it doesn't get any easier, and they'll really need to sharpen up because if not, like they could be taken to the cleaners there.
Then in that same day, we that was a doubleheader on Saturday, obviously, and the second game of the doubleheader was a run fest between Sri Lanka and South Africa at Firozshah Kotla. I know it's called Arun Jaitley now, but Kotla just is it's a much better name, so I'm going to continue to say that. It was an absolute run fest. We saw South Africa post the highest ever World Cup score, right? If I'm
Yeah,
not mistaken.
they broke record after record after record,
Yeah,
300s in one game from like Markram de Kock and Van der Dusen. Like that
and then
must be
Aiden
killing
Markram actually ended up breaking the record of O'Brien from Ireland for the fastest ever World Cup 100 as well. And he's a guy that we've highlighted as someone who South Africa needs to come to the party and finally come of age, which it looks like he's doing. I think he was excellent. Quinton de Kock got runs. David Miller came in. Heinrich Klaassen, he hit a quick 30. So they were really firing on all cylinders. And it was as well as Sri Lanka played. I thought if Sri Lanka maybe had them at a 380-ish, 370s, they would have been in with a genuine chance because despite everybody we talked about before, Kushal Mendes probably had the most attractive innings out of everybody
yeah.
under lights, and with that pickup shot. I think he hit 6 or 7 sixes.
He hit
Um,
Giri for 3 sixes with that pickup shot in 1 over,
yeah,
and like that just sort of changed the tide. And honestly, like credit to Sri Lanka, like with a spirited response, like led by Kusal Mendes, and like we said, like he when he lost that wicket, they didn't lose hope. Like they continued to go for it, and like Dashan Chanaka, their captain, got a really good 50 at the end as well. And so credit to
even when
them for
Shanaka was playing at the end, Hux, like obviously, um, Asalanka played a really
they
good
were
knock,
like
but
level
even
with
yeah,
Sri Lanka
exactly.
and with sorry South Africa in terms of run rate. They just
At
lost too
that
many wickets,
stage.
right? Yeah,
So while Chanaka was there, had another settled batsman still been there, or had they had some type of partnership with a little bit more wickets in hand, you never know. And that's what I really admire about Sri Lanka is that you see a lot of fighting spirit in that camp. Aside from that, I found South Africa's. They, I liked their attack. They went with four genuine pacers, and I don't know about you, but I was really impressed by Kutsia. I thought he has a lot of pace. He's an aggressive bowler. I know they're missing that with Nokia going out, but the lines and the lengths and the speeds this guy bowled and his presence on the field is something that I think will bode really well for them if he continues to play. And
yeah.
Marco Jansen, admittedly, someone who I haven't really seen yet, but you hear so much about him, and he lived up to a lot
Yeah,
of what you hear about him.
those two wickets of Sanka and Kusal Pereira, where like he just got a little bit of in swing to take both of their like middle stumps essentially. Those are some really good deliveries. So like promising signs for him. I know he went for a little bit of runs later, but like who didn't in this game?
Yeah,
So again, encouraging for South Africa. The other interesting decision was that they chose to go with four pacers, and then Maharaj to back him up. So Tabriz Shamsi, like their spinner, was left on the bench. Again, they'll have matches in more spin-friendly conditions, including like when they play Pakistan at Chennai. So I would expect both those spinners to play in those games. But they have a attack that they can vary based on the conditions, which is good signs for them. And we spoke about it just going back to their batting, that they have the best death overs hitters in this entire competition with the likes of Klassen, Miller, and obviously Marco Jansen as well. So when they get that platform from the top order, which they did today, like you're not gonna be able to stop them because they just have the ability to play spin well. They can hit fast bowlers as well, and when you get a track as flat as the Delhi wicket was, like that's just a recipe that they get one, just like break all the records that you possibly can, which they did. With the Sri Lankan bowlers, again, you felt a little bit for them because they had obviously key injuries, which means like this is a quite inexperienced attack. Obviously, Hasaranga missing, Jamira missing, and then Tikshana was actually included in the squad, was not fit enough for this game. Remains to be seen whether he regains fitness in time for that second game against Pakistan. But yeah, overall, I think their pacers, like once South Africans took the attack to them, that inexperience really showed, and they were never really able to come back into the game. Also, just something for opposition batters to take note of for the rest of this tournament. That if you go hard at them early, like you could put them under a little bit of pressure with their inexperience.
we'll get into the last game of the first round of games, which is obviously host and one of the favorites, India versus five-time champions Australia. And it's a game that had a lot of hype, and there were a lot of good moments in this game. I would say that even for a large part of India's second innings, it was close, but then you just it's Virat Kohli again at the end there, just doing Virat Kohli things. Um, Getting India home from a really tough position. Obviously, Australia, I think at one point lost 5 wickets for 30 runs, which took a lot of the momentum out of their run chase. At a stage when Warner and Smith were batting, and even when Smith and Labuschagne were batting, they looked like they could get around 250, 260, which on this pitch it probably would have been a winning score.
And that's an important
Massive,
point, right? Like this pitch, the reason you say that is because Chennai is known for being spin friendly. It's one of the more spin friendly conditions that we'll see throughout this tournament. And obviously, with India having the likes of Jadeja and Yadav, and they backed it up with Ashwin playing this game as well. Ashwin was drafted in, of course, to the squad with the injury to Akshar Patel. So it meant that they had a really experienced spin attack. And to be honest, like Australia had no answers to them. With like what Arman said, their middle order is absolutely collapsing. Their lower order, like Stark and Cummins, hung around for a little bit to get them to 200. Otherwise, they could have been easily bundled out for like 160.
yeah.
So yeah, that's something for Australia to really be concerned about because like they will play tracks like this in the tournament. Of course, maybe not spin attacks as strong as India's, But if their batting comes under pressure, like they'll need to have a game plan to be able to get out of it, whether that be like using their feet. And that's something we usually see from Stephen
Usually see
Smith,
from
but
them.
it
I
wasn't on
wonder
show
if
today.
Paddy Cummins got it wrong today, though, Shan, because I heard the commentator saying as well that even at the toss, Rohit looked like he wanted to bat first, but as the innings progressed and as the game progressed, um, after India got through that initial phase with that really good partnership between Lokesh Rahul and Kohli, you saw a little bit of dew coming in to it, and there really wasn't that type of purchase. For Zampa didn't really bowl that well, and Australia does not have the abundance of options in spin that India do, but it looked like a slightly easier wicket to bat on. So I wonder if Pat Cummins got if he missed the trick a little bit there with the toss. Obviously, we'll keep an eye on his captaincy going forward. But even for Australia, I would say with their bowling, a lot of good signs. They couldn't obviously break through, and they had that. I mean, if they took the catch of Kohli, the game I would say it would have been in Australia's favor.
Yeah.
Not a man you want to drop.
You want to drop, and it proved to be the
At
case.
the worst of times, yeah.
I think
But I
just
think with Hazelwood and Stark, that opening spell was amazing, and Stark getting 50 wickets in in his World Cup career now, and he's really amongst the legends of the one day game at this point, especially in this
just talking a
competition.
little bit more about like Australia's tactics in this game. I think they came in a little bit with like India's spin attack weighing heavily on their mind, and sort of that meant that like even before they lost wickets, I think their scoring rate was quite low. So like they were always looking at like a 250, 260 type total. Um, and maybe and then obviously when they lost wickets, like that was all compounded, so they eventually were only able to get to 200. And then when you come to their second innings, like they started out like a house on fire, right? Getting India 2 for 3, and from that sort of position, like you really need to attack. They obviously had the chance with Kohli pulling or top edging Hazelwood, and Mitchell Marsh and Carey just got confused between themselves and had like one of those Saeed Ajmal, Shoaib Malik type moments where like the catch was missed. Obviously, it wasn't as bad as that because Pakistanis do it best, but again, like that missed opportunity cost them in the game. And I think we spoke a little bit about this off air as well. That Pat Cummins really didn't attack. Like when the fast bowlers were on top, he should have given them an extended spell, especially when you are defending a lower total. Instead, he
It's a
got on the
40
likes
over
of
game at that
Maxwell
point.
and Green, like part timers who, like, to be fair, like Maxwell kept things tight, but like he allowed the players to settle in. And then, like, if you were going to get a spinner on, then get Zampa on, right? Back. He's the one main spinner that you have in the squad, which, again, is an issue for me because Australia, if, like, Zampa doesn't pick up form, they don't have anyone to replace him with. Ashton Agar was originally in their squad, but through a combination of wanting to get Martin established in and, like, him picking up an injury, they weren't able to get him in. And I don't know who their other options were, but regardless, I think that's going to be a major concern for Australia because they're really heavily dependent on Zampa picking up form, and with Maxwell being like a part timer, you're really relying on your fast bowling attack, which again, they are a quality attack, but they're not always going to be able to get you the entire 10 wickets that you need because you do need spinners on this track. So interesting to see how Australia recover from it. Again, they have the quality to do so, but I think that is something to be concerned about with their
I didn't
attack.
like their body language today. I think that's something that really stuck out to me. Losing is obviously one thing, and losing to Kohli is something that I think a lot of teams we talk about how much he's traumatized us, like as kids growing up, and how many days he's ruined, like for Pakistani fans. But Australian के भी कोई कम दिन खराब नहीं किए उस बंदे ने, and you can see that weigh on them as he's out there, and especially towards the end, as that partnership continued to grow, a lot of things you saw were really un-Australian in terms of the fields they were setting. It's a weird point, but when they got Kohli out, with about 30, 40, whatever it was left, there was no celebration. And for most teams, there would not be a celebration. But Australia, you associate with them having that delusional confidence to win from all phases of the game. And I saw that lacking today. So I'm going to keep an eye on how Pat Cummins takes his team going forward. We've seen them start slow and do well before. I just want to. I hope to see a better attitude from them going forward, though. And the same was there in batting. They look jolted, which is
Mhm.
not something you associate with Australia.
But before we finish up on them, I think I've seen something very like much recently with Australia, especially when they're playing India. It's something that we noticed a lot when we used to play India in the past, like in the recent, like before the 2017 Champions Trophy win, where our players sort of had that inferiority complex against them, where we felt like they were the better team going into it. And like that's not something you associate with Australia at all. But I feel like maybe with India beating them back to back in a series in Australia, and also just recently in the one days, like taking them to the cleaners, they did seem to have a lack of confidence here, and I think they felt that India was the better team, which for like an Australian team is like almost like the biggest
Blasphemy.
criticism that I can have.
You got 5 of those stars on your kit. Nobody's got anywhere near that.
mm,
So we, especially growing up, having seen the dominant and extremely confident teams of the past, it was disappointing to see that. For India, I think it was a really good game. They checked a lot of boxes.
I wanted to shout out KL Rahul because I think when he came to the crease, like it was a tough situation. Like since he's come from injury, he's been batting really well. And like initially, like Kohli was a little bit tentative, but like KL Rahul looked pretty comfortable from like the onset. And an excellent knock for him.
Me too, me too. And I do think that having somebody with Kohli, like Kohli with you there, makes your job a hell of a lot easier. I think Kohli was. I know Rahul was scoring quickly, but I think Kohli was absolutely bossing that chase just through his presence alone, and that's an amazing sign for India. That again, having their top order failed, but still now having the ability with some of these guys coming in the middle order to stay in the contest is awesome for them, and they bowled quite well today as well.